everyone, and welcome back to the Marketer of the Day podcast. We are here with return guest Meredith Bell. She was previously here at marketeroftheday.com/438. Today, we're going to be talking about communication skills, how to be a truly powerful listener, how to accept constructive feedback, all this pesky peopling sort of activity. So, Meredith, glad to be talking to you again.
Oh, Robert, it's great to be back. It's been a long time.
Yeah. So, I mean, in the past, I don't know, like a couple of years, what has gotten you excited about your business, and what's kind of on the cutting edge for you?
Well, 2020 was a year, of course, as you know, that turned everybody upside down, but we had intentionally planned on writing and publishing books. So it worked out very well. So that's a big thing. My business partners, I have two of them, and we have worked together now for 30 years. And we just decided it was time to put in writing in the form of books the information, knowledge, wisdom we've acquired over all these years. And so I wrote a book called Strong for Performance about how to create a coaching culture and make sure your training programs stick. And then Denny and I published a book in August of 2020 around the top 10 communication skills, because consistently over the years, as people have used our software tools, they have, mentioned time and again, the number one issue in organizations, whether it's people inside talking to each other, people talking to vendors or clients, it's communication. That always gets in the way. So we wanted to create a book that would be easy for people to follow, use, implement on connecting more effectively with others. So the title of it, as we both have, is Connect with Your Team, Mastering the Top 10 Communication Skills. So that's what I'm excited about. We are passionate about getting this out to people to reduce the amount of pain that's in so many workplaces. And what's nice is these same skills can be used at home. So to improve relationships across the board.
It has so many uses. And I like how the way you set this up, where it seems like at the end of every chapter, there's like this chapter in a nutshell, and there's just a lot of weight and like appendices. So if you decide that maybe you don't have time right now to go through every chapter, you can just go to the end of each chapter. You can see kind of the cliff notes. I like how that is built in. And a lot of this, I mean, the two things come to mind. One thing that comes to mind is thinking back to old workplaces and old bosses. And it seems like this whole concept of the communication skills, it's like if it's lacking, you really notice it. But then if that boss is doing things right, or your coworkers are communicating well with you, you don't really notice it and you don't really appreciate it. So it's sometimes hard to get what the value is in here, because when it's working, it's just, you don't really notice it. And then the second thing that comes to mind is that lately I've been getting better at not doing all the work myself and at hiring. And it seemed like years ago, I thought there were just one of two extremes. Either I run it all myself and it's all perfect, even though it's not, but you tell yourself that, or someone else runs it and it's terrible, even though there's an adjusting period. And lately I've been getting warmed up to that idea of just let someone go and let someone spend a few hours on something or a few days and then fix it, and have kind of that forward thinking optimism, knowing that they'll do better long-term if they learn it, I guess, by doing, and that it's just better for everyone if you are polite and you let them do their thing and figure it out. And it's a new way of thinking.
Well, and Robert, building on that idea, we have a chapter in the book called Getting Buy-in for Expectations, which I think is perfect for someone like you and other entrepreneurs who don't want to necessarily hire someone, but whether you've got an employee or someone you're contracting with to get things done, the idea of getting agreement up front is so important on, what is expected, what you're agreeing to do, because too many times we think we've been clear, or we make assumptions about what the other person understood, and then we find out later when it didn't get done correctly or on time that somewhere the ball got dropped. So I think it behooves business owners like us to take responsibility and take the initiative for being clear about instructions and ensure the other person really understands, accepts, and agrees to those expectations or parameters that have been established.
And I've noticed that technique lately. I'm not sure if it was always there, and I've just now picked up on it. But I've noticed lately more and more with like these online chats dealing with like there. I've one coach, or like I'm his coach. I don't know what that would make him, but like I guess my student, I'll see him dealing with his employees, and he'll do a lot of, I just said this, now repeat it back to me in your own words. And it's a little bit scary. It puts the person on the spot, but if you think about it, it's like, okay, that's really simple. It just, when you state it back in your own words, then there's no wiggle room there. It's like either you understand it or you don't. And then now if you repeated back to me the same thing I said, or more or less, then we're on the same page. So I thought that was a simple but usable technique that now I'm seeing everywhere. I can't get away from it.
Well, it's very good because as you well know, all of us have our minds wander at times, and someone may have just said a key point that we totally missed. And so when we get somebody to say back to us what they understood we said, that's very powerful because it helps the speaker understand where they have not been clear. If the person says back something that is not what they intended, then it allows the speaker to clarify, no, here's what I meant. And so you make sure there's been no misunderstanding before you each go your separate ways and make assumptions about what's been agreed to.
Before wasting who knows how many days, and then you have to go and
Yes.
backtrack and all that time, when if only you spent a few seconds just making sure, you could have avoided that.
Mm-hmm. Such an important point.
And a lot of what we're talking about here reminds me of the idea of being 100% there and being 100% present. And that was a tough thing to learn, to kind of unlearn and relearn after high school, going into college. And then it was tough again to relearn after smartphones came out, because it's so tempting. And then I guess relearn again now that there's so much like online work being done and not necessarily in person. It's just so tough to like be here and being in a meeting and talk to you. And it's easy. It's like, oh, should I have windows open, or should I have something on my phone, or I'm thinking about lunch. Has that helped you, or is that like an important pillar in what you do, is just being 100% there and focused?
Robert, that is, I wish I could, put 10 asterisks around what you just said, because being fully present with someone is one of the greatest gifts that you can give another human being. It's that critical, because what you're saying is, I value you, I respect you, I respect what you're saying. If someone is watching us get distracted, check our phone, look around, it's communicating, I've got better things to do. And it does nothing to strengthen the relationship. So one of the first things we recommend in listening is set aside everything else. And it's especially hard to do if you're on a call where you're not looking directly at the other person, right? Or it's not an in-person meeting. If they can't see what you're doing, it's tempting to check your email or check social media or do something else. But I'll tell you the truth, when you do that, you are missing out on some element of what the other person is saying, because the brain cannot focus on two separate things at the same time. So if you're reading an email, because I've done it, right? You're not hearing what the other person is saying. And so that's really critical. The other thing is actually physical. The more we try to look at multiple things at once, the more the brain becomes chaotic in terms of bouncing around. And so if we can really discipline ourselves to focus on one person, what they're saying, it's really a more time efficient way than thinking we're fooling ourselves by doing multiple things at one time. It's better to focus briefly on this one person, take care of this, and then be able to move on to the other thing.
it's sort of counterintuitive, isn't it? You think that by multitasking that you're using up all the available time, but really you're just doing two or three things very badly. And I think about times when even like I mean, if you're driving and you look at your phone for a second, you're like, what happened the last 200 feet? Or if you're watching a movie or a TV show, you check the phone, you're like, I don't even remember the last 5 minutes. And imagine all the little things that you need to pay attention to when you're dealing with face to face. So, I mean, you're completely right, and it's one of those. It reminds me of like flossing. Like everyone like knows they should do it, but very few people actually do it. But once you get the hang of it, it's not that big of a deal. You just have to put. I don't know if putting in the work is the right saying, but you have to maybe make a conscious effort at first until that becomes part of your lifestyle.
Well, this really has an impact on business directly. When you think about speaking with a potential client, if they sense that you are keenly interested in them, in the way, your body language, your tone of voice, your posture, and just your focus on them, and then you ask them questions or you make observations based on things they've said, there's a strengthening of the connection that happens there that we need to not, underestimate the power of that. And so it takes practice though. You can't just do it one time. It's like, trying to multitask. If your habit is check your phone every so many minutes, it takes a while to break that habit and switch to turning it off, setting it aside, putting it in another room so that you don't look at it. Because the more you can practice really focusing your attention and really responding appropriately to the person in front of you, I think the impact on your business, the impact on the relationships you form, because so few people do it, Robert. That's the key thing. You set yourself apart when you are really present with that other person and give them your full attention. Now, there are times like if you're listening to music in the car while you're driving, that's different. Or you're, doing laundry while you're listening to a podcast. That's a little different kind of multitasking because one of them is sort of a mindless kind of thing. But when you're talking about relationships where you need to interact with another person, that's a whole different story. And it really does, if you're serious about building strong relationships, then training yourself to really focus on them will get you so far.
I like that distinction you made there that multitasking can be useful, right? If you are listening to a podcast while doing the dishes or doing laundry, but then when you're dealing with people and relationships, that's a situation where multitasking will hurt you. So I like that it's a tool to be used sometimes, just like how the thinking fast and thinking chaotically, maybe that comes into play. Sometimes the fight or flight, maybe there are situations where you do have to see 10 things for like a couple of minutes, but if you live your whole life that way, you would just be exhausted. So that's what I'm getting from you, is that we have to kind of maybe be more flexible and know if we're in this situation, use these tools in the toolbox. And so you mentioned when we first began speaking that you've been at this for all these decades. You've got these business partners for 30 years, and I'm sure they have some interesting stories. So I'm not sure if it relates to like a story from the book or something that comes to mind in a conversation, but do you have any like interesting stories to really drive our point home about some of these skills we need to pick up?
Yes, I do actually. One of them, Denny is the kind of person who moves fast, he thinks fast. And years ago, this relates to the three of us, learning to work effectively together. And fortunately, we've all had good communication skills, but there was a period of time when Denny used to interrupt Paula and me because he was either in a hurry or he thought he knew what we were going to say, so he'd finish our sentences, and it was really annoying us. And so we addressed it with him and we looked at, we would like you to change this behavior, but we know from our own work that changing a behavior takes time. And it's most effective when you can practice it and get support for the new behavior. That's why groups like 12-step programs are so popular. So what we did to support him, this may be useful for your listeners. If they have someone who's engaging in interruption or another behavior that's annoying, to be able to address it, but then also, add in, we want to support you in making this change. So we're going to come up with a couple of strategies that will be useful. So here's what we did. For in-person meetings, we used to just hold up our hand like a stop sign, right? If he started to jump in, that was his cue that he was interrupting and to back off. And so he'd catch himself when he just saw that one hand signal. The other thing that we did was especially if we were having remote conversations and we weren't in the same room physically, although this could work either way, is simply to say, I wasn't done yet, or please let me finish. And the key there, of course, is tone of voice, because if you act annoyed and you say, please let me finish, then that's really not helpful, right? So doing it in a way that is a reminder, but not in a way that's punitive, I think is an important aspect of supporting someone trying to make a change. What's interesting, Robert, is all these years later, when the three of us are having a conversation, and we now all work in different states, we have been remote for a number of years, we will do that with each other, because if we're in a brainstorming session or we're creating something new, and one of us is talking about something and the other gets an idea and jumps in, we still say that to each other, hey, I wasn't done yet. And then the other one knows to back off. So I think a key aspect of what we've learned over the years is just being honest with each other and coming up with ways to efficiently interact, and even sometimes to say, I'm going to bring up an idea that is different than what we've thought of before. I really would like you to keep an open mind as I describe this. So setting the stage rather than just jumping in and trying to convince someone, I think framing things in a way that gives the person permission to not necessarily agree, but encourages them to consider the other person's idea. So I think all of those things. We've, each one of us, Robert, grown in our own personal development and our own communication skills with each other. And if I can give you a second example that might be helpful for your listeners, this relates to me, where in the early years that Denny and I were working together, because he's a writer, he has a PhD in English, and I did some writing, but as we were creating our products, which of course had written materials, or creating marketing messages, and I would give it to him after I had drafted something and gave it to him to review, I used to get defensive when he would, point out things that maybe he thought could be improved. I tended to take it personally. My self-esteem was not as strong as it is today, and I wasn't as comfortable in our exchanges. And so I think now we don't waste any time with taking anything personally. It's, you really need to redo this because it's not clear. Being able to take, and I won't even say criticism, input, feedback in an objective way, recognizing you both have the same goal of making improvements. It's not intended as a criticism of me personally. It's the goal of looking at how can we get to the best possible outcome. And I think that's an important aspect when people are working together, to recognize that everybody's not going to agree with you, and they may have input that could be valuable. And if you waste time and energy telling yourself stories about, why is this person criticizing me? Why are they being negative? And instead say, hey, they're giving me some information that's useful, and take a more neutral position, it makes a world of difference in how the conversation goes.
And a lot of the things you're mentioning here are just like setting off all kinds of light bulbs, as far as like a lot of skills that sadly took many years to just to strengthen. Like the things you're talking about, the like letting go of the fragile self-esteem and being honest, because it just makes things simpler. And I mean, there were times growing up when like members of my family would just be nasty just because like it felt good to them, or being sarcastic, and then your response would be to kind of go to war and kind of one up the sarcasm. And I mean, what does that really accomplish? And that's not mature, that's not adulting. And then that, you're making me think about, like it would lead to a lot of thinking I could imagine what the other person was thinking or what the other person was going to say, and the mind reading. And it makes me mad just thinking about it, just how confusing and complicated just something simple was. And then versus if you simplified that and you use whatever brain power was left in that equation to then do the things like setting the stage, to then do the things like the framing and like being careful. And if it's kind of a new shaky idea, you say, well, like, just tell me what you think about this, or like, let me just get it on the table, or, you know, we can change this later, but here's just the first draft of it. Like little things like that. It's like, it's like pulling the rope in the same direction. Everyone is on the same team. Everyone wants the same thing. And knowing that there might be a little bit of an uncomfortable transition dealing with the hands pulled up, or might be a little bit awkward, or you might get like embarrassed at first. But if the goal is for everyone to get along and get these things accomplished, I mean, it makes a lot of sense looking at it from your perspective versus the old fashioned way of just trying to fight your way out of it, which you get tired really fast and just get frustrated and annoyed.
Well, and you know, the other thing that gets in there is our ego and the need to be right. Because sometimes we think, I've got to save face here and not be wrong, not be shown to be wrong, especially if we're in a meeting together and somebody is, you know, punching down our idea. And it's like, well, wait a minute, I've got to really push back because I don't want to look bad. And again, it's that setting aside the ego to look at what are we trying to accomplish here, and not wasting time. Because when we get our emotions all tied up in knots around what somebody said, then we can't think clearly and respond in a positive way to move things forward. We tend to get defensive, and we're building an argument, you know, in our brains and waiting for our turn to talk, or we interrupt them and start defending ourselves. And none of that sets the stage for true dialogue where we can learn from each other and come up with the best possible solution.
I agree completely. And I've also had to let go of the idea of the perfectionism, because there was the feeling of, if I say something in a group or a meeting, it has to be the most impressive thing anyone said, and it has to be like no flaws and the best thing. But then if someone else makes a joke, or if someone else says things, I felt like that would move things down a few notches. And looking back on it now, I think what a weird way to think, right? Of trying to get a perfect score, and why not just be, and why not just like get along and do what you're there to do. So it makes a lot of sense. And as we're wrapping up, winding down, is there anything that you think people are really missing these days? Because, you know, we talked about a lot of things that are easy to implement, or maybe easy at first but tough to stick with, a lot of things that are common sense. What's something maybe in this book that if someone opened to it, they'd say, whoa, like that's something I hadn't even thought
Yeah.
of?
I've got two quick things. One is look for more opportunities to express appreciation to other people about something they've done. Even if it's just checking out in the grocery line and somebody was very efficient, look them in the eye and say, I appreciate how efficient you were. You know, there are so few people that are going out of their way to make others feel valued. So if you do that, you will really stand out. The other thing is being gracious when somebody has feedback for you that's not positive, so that you are able to actually seek that kind of feedback. You know, what did you think about my presentation? Or what did you think about this idea? To ask for that, and then thank people when they're honest with you and give it, so that they are encouraged to give you more of it, because we all have blind spots. So if somebody's willing to point out to me where I said or did something that didn't sit well with them. I want to know about it. So to thank them after they give it, and then just ask. If it's something you did that was really offensive to them, just say, what can I do to make things right? And apologize. Too often we hold off apologizing because we think it's going to make us look weak, when in fact, if we apologize, people respect us more. So I think being willing to accept feedback graciously and look for how can I improve next time so I don't make the same mistake, I think is just huge in terms of relationship building.
I'll remember that phrase. What can I do to make this better next time? And even the way that you position it there, they're doing you a favor. If they point out something that you are saying or doing that you're going to continue doing it, you don't even have an idea that you're doing it, then why not nip that in the bud, and why not have them alert that to you? That way you can maybe not overnight, but slowly change your behavior, or at least be aware of when you do the interrupting and you need that, or something along those lines. They're doing you a favor, because if they're noticing it, then maybe not everyone notices it, but other people will be noticing it in the future. That's really good.
Right.
Okay, so where can people find this book, and where can people connect with you and find out all the cool things you've been up to lately?
Well, the book Connect with Your Team is available on Amazon. We also have a free ebook on the topic of listening. It's called Listen Like a Pro. That's on our website. People can download it for free. It's really an excerpt of one of the chapters in the book on listening, and that's at growstrongleaders.com/free. So they can go there and download that and sort of get a taste of the book, and then purchase the book if they want to. They can connect with me on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter. I'm on those platforms, Meredith Bell.
And this listening free guide you have, there better be an audio version, right? Not just written.
That's a great idea. Right now, it's just in the form of an ebook.
Okay, well, then we can read it and hear the voice in our head that will
That's
speak it
right.
out for us. Great stuff. So that is growstrongleaders.com/free. And then how do they jump directly to the book? Is there a domain name for that? Or
There's
just
a
search it?
link on that page to go to the book on Amazon, or they can just go directly to Amazon and search on Connect with Your Team, and they'll see it by me and Denny Coates.
Super great. And if you out there, if you want to connect with your team, whatever your team entails, like Meredith said, it could even help your relationships with some of the things that we've even mentioned in this call, as far as listening and being aware and being appreciative, and all these little things that when you're using them, a lot of people won't notice, but they will notice the results. And if these things are lacking, then your life will be unnecessarily complicated, and probably your business too. So why make it hard on yourself? It's the current modern age where we can communicate across different states and we can be on video chat. It seems ridiculous to not be tapped into the latest and greatest techniques. So get this Connect with Your Team book, growstrongleaders.com/free. Connect with Meredith Bell on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter, and we will see you there. So Meredith, any final parting words before we wrap up here?
No, Robert, thank you. This was just really great. And I guess there is one, and that is simply to look at your relationships with other people and ask yourself, is it working the way I hoped it would? And if it's not, to ask each person individually, what could I do to help make our relationship even better? For the people that matter to you most, that's a powerful question to ask.